On the night of December 6, 1991, Austin, Texas was settling into a quiet winter Friday. Stores were closing, families were home, and nothing about the evening suggested it would become one of the darkest chapters in the city's history. Inside, a small frozen yogurt shop called I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, 4 teenage girls were spending what should have been an ordinary night. 2 of them were employees finishing a closing shift. The other 2 were simply there to keep their friends company. By the end of that night, all 4 would be brutally murdered, and the case would go on to torment investigators, families, and the entire nation for decades. 17-year-old Eliza Thomas and Jennifer Harbison were working the closing shift. Eliza was quiet, kind, and responsible, the type of girl parents trusted. Jennifer was confident, outspoken, and fiercely protective of her younger sister Sarah, who was only 15. 13-year-old Amy Ayers, the youngest of the group, had come along as well. The shop was a popular hangout for teens, bright and cheerful, filled with pastel colors and the smell of sweet yogurt. That night, laughter and casual conversation echoed inside its walls, unaware that something terrifying was about to happen. At around 11 p.m., firefighters were called to the scene after reports of smoke coming from the yogurt shop. Fires in small retail stores weren't unusual, and no one expected what awaited inside. When firefighters forced their way through the locked doors, they were met with thick smoke and the remains of a fire that had already burned itself out. As they moved deeper into the building, they discovered something far worse than any accidental blaze. In the back of the shop, lying on the floor amid the charred remains, were 4 bodies. The girls had been bound with electrical cords, forced face down, and shot execution style in the head. The fire had been deliberately set after the murders, likely in an attempt to destroy evidence and delay discovery. Despite the damage caused by the flames, investigators could immediately tell this was no accident. It was a calculated, violent act carried out with chilling cruelty. Autopsies later revealed that at least 2 of the girls had been sexually assaulted. Evidence suggested that the attackers had controlled the scene for some time, moving the girls around the shop before killing them. The sheer brutality of the crime shocked even seasoned investigators. Austin, a city that prided itself on safety and community, was suddenly gripped by fear. The investigation began under intense pressure. 4 teenage girls had been murdered, and the public demanded answers immediately. Police worked around the clock, collecting what evidence they could from the burned scene. Shell casings were recovered, indicating the use of a .22 caliber firearm. There were signs of forced control, but no clear eyewitnesses. Whoever committed the crime had vanished into the night. Early on, investigators struggled. The fire had destroyed much of the physical evidence, and the crime scene had not been preserved as carefully as it should have been. Some areas were contaminated before proper forensic analysis could be done. As days turned into weeks with no arrests, frustration grew. Parents feared letting their children work late. The yogurt shop murders became the only thing people talked about. Years passed and the case went cold. Then, in 1999, nearly 8 years after the murders, police announced a breakthrough. 4 young men were arrested: Michael Scott, Robert Springsteen, Chris O'Brien, and Morris Pierce. The arrests shocked the city. Finally, it seemed there would be justice. The case against them relied heavily on confessions. Police claimed that several of the suspects had admitted involvement in the murders during lengthy interrogations. However, the details surrounding those confessions immediately raised red flags. The interrogations had lasted for hours, sometimes without lawyers present. Some of the suspects had intellectual limitations, making them more vulnerable to pressure. Parts of the confessions contradicted known evidence, while other details appeared to have been fed to them by investigators. Despite these issues, prosecutors moved forward. In 2001, Michael Scott and Robert Springsteen were convicted and sentenced to life in prison. For the victims' families, it was a bittersweet moment. There was relief that someone had been held responsible, but doubts lingered. Something about the case didn't feel right. Those doubts would soon prove justified. Defense attorneys continued to fight, arguing that the confessions were coerced and unreliable. They pointed out that there was no physical evidence linking the men to the crime scene. No DNA, no fingerprints, no weapon. Everything rested on statements obtained under questionable circumstances. In 2009, a Texas appeals court overturned the convictions, ruling that the confessions were not trustworthy. Scott and Springsteen were released from prison after spending years behind bars for a crime they insisted they did not commit. Eventually, all charges against the four men were dropped. The relief of their release was overshadowed by a horrifying reality. The yogurt shop murders were unsolved once again. For the families of Eliza, Jennifer, Sarah, and Amy, it was like losing their daughters all over again. Decades had passed, evidence had degraded, and memories had faded. The chance of finding the real killers seemed slimmer than ever. Over the years, multiple theories have emerged. Some believe the crime was committed by local criminals who were never properly investigated. Others point to possible links with similar violent crimes in the area during that time. There were reports of suspicious individuals seen near the shop that night, but leads were never fully followed. Mistakes made early in the investigation may have permanently buried the truth. What makes the case even more disturbing is the level of cruelty involved. This was not a robbery gone wrong. Money was left behind. The attackers took their time, controlled the victims, and carried out the murders with cold intent. It suggested anger, dominance, and a complete lack of empathy. Today, more than 30 years later, the yogurt shop still stands in memory as a symbol of unanswered questions. The victims are remembered not just as names in a case file, but as daughters, sisters, and friends whose futures were stolen. Eliza wanted to go to college. Jennifer dreamed of independence. Sarah was just beginning to understand the world. Amy was still a child. The case remains officially open. Investigators continue to say that new DNA technology could one day provide answers, but time is the greatest enemy. Witnesses age, suspects disappear, and evidence fades. The yogurt shop murders are not just a story of a brutal crime, but of a system that failed at every stage, failed to protect, failed to investigate properly, and failed to deliver justice. It is a reminder that sometimes the truth does not come with closure, and some wounds never fully heal. In Austin, people still remember that night. Parents still mention it when warning their children. And somewhere, the person or people responsible for the deaths of four innocent girls have never been held accountable. Until the truth is known, the yogurt shop murders will remain one of America's most haunting unsolved crimes, a dark shadow stretching across generations, whispering the same unanswered question: who really did it?